The sheep were stirring again, their nervous bleating cutting through the stillness of the Colorado night. And Eliza Ramsey knew exactly what that meant even before she heard the distant howl of coyotes drifting across the grasslands beyond Porterville. She pulled her wool shawl tighter around her shoulders and reached for the rifle propped against the weathered fence post, her fingers finding the familiar grooves in the stock without needing to look. At 19 years old, she had been guarding her father's small flock for 3 years now, ever since her older brother Thomas had died from fever and left them short-handed on their struggling farm. The spring of 1878 had brought warm days but bitter cold nights, and the predators were hungry after the harsh winter. The stars stretched endlessly above her, thousands of pinpricks of light scattered across the black canvas of sky. Eliza had always loved this part of the watch, despite the cold and the exhaustion that came with rising before dawn to help her mother with the household chores. She had learned to count the stars in groups, creating patterns and pathways between the brightest points, inventing stories about each constellation she could identify. Her father had given her an old astronomy book 2 Christmases ago, and she had memorized every diagram and description, matching them to the real sky whenever she could. 147, she whispered to herself, marking a section of sky between Orion's belt and the Big Dipper. 148, 149. The sheep settled again, their collective tension easing as the coyote howls faded into the distance. Eliza lowered the rifle but kept it close, settling back onto the wooden stool she had carried out from the barn. Her father would be sleeping now, his back too weak these days to handle the night watches. Her mother would be sitting up with her mending, waiting to hear Eliza's footsteps on the porch before she would allow herself to sleep. They had come to Colorado from Missouri 5 years earlier, drawn by the promise of cheap land and new opportunities. The reality had been harder than the promise. The farm was small, the soil was difficult, and they were always just one bad season away from losing everything. But they had the sheep, about 40 head now, and they provided wool and occasionally meat to sell in town. It was not much, but it was theirs. Eliza returned her gaze to the stars, continuing her count. 150, 151. That is a lot of stars. The voice came from behind her, male and unfamiliar, and Eliza spun around with the rifle raised before her mind had fully registered the words. Her heart hammered in her chest as she found herself pointing the barrel at a man standing about 10 feet away, his hands raised peacefully in the air. "Easy there," he said, his voice calm and measured. "I did not mean to startle you. I saw your light from the road and thought I should make myself known rather than just riding past. Folks can get jumpy out here at night." "You already startled me," Eliza said, keeping the rifle steady despite the trembling in her arms. "Who are you and what are you doing on our land?" The man took a careful step forward into the pale moonlight, and Eliza could see him more clearly now. He was young, probably only a few years older than herself, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and kind eyes that reflected the lantern light. He wore dusty traveling clothes and a worn leather vest, and his hands remained raised in a non-threatening gesture. "My name is Xavier Ashford," he said. "I have been working cattle drives up from Texas, and I am heading toward the ranch about 5 miles north of here. The owner, Mr. Garrett, hired me on last month through a letter. I apologize for the intrusion. The main road curves close to your property here, and I saw you sitting out with the flock. I figured it was better to announce myself than have you think someone was sneaking around." Eliza considered his words, studying his face for any signs of deception. He looked tired and dusty from travel, but his expression was open and honest. Slowly, she lowered the rifle but kept it resting across her lap. "The Garrett Ranch," she said. "I know it. Mr. Garrett mentioned he was bringing in new help. You are a long way from Texas." "That I am," Xavier said, lowering his hands now that the rifle was no longer pointed at him. "May I step closer, or would you prefer I kept my distance?" "You can come a bit closer, but not too close," Eliza said, "and keep your hands where I can see them." Xavier moved forward carefully, stopping about 6 feet away. He glanced up at the sky, then back at her. "Were you really counting the stars?" "I was," Eliza said, a hint of defensiveness in her voice. "Is that strange to you?" "No, not strange," Xavier said, and there was genuine warmth in his voice. "Just unexpected. Most folks I know do not pay much attention to the sky unless they are using it for navigation. How many did you count?" "I was up to 151 when you interrupted me," Eliza said. "But I was not trying to count them all. That would be impossible. I count sections, creating patterns. It helps pass the time during the long watches." Xavier tilted his head back, looking up at the vast expanse of stars. "It is beautiful out here." In Texas, the sky seemed bigger somehow, but maybe that was just because everything else was so flat. These mountains in the distance changed the perspective. Despite her initial fear, Eliza found herself relaxing slightly. There was something genuine about this cowboy, something that made her believe he truly had just been trying to be courteous rather than threatening. Still, she kept the rifle close. "How long have you been traveling?" she asked. 3 weeks, Xavier said. "I was working a ranch down near Fort Worth, but the owner sold off most of his herd and did not need as many hands. Mr. Garrett offered good wages and year-round work, so I headed north. I have been camping along the way, trying to make my money last until I get paid again." "You must be tired," Eliza said. "I am," Xavier admitted, "but I wanted to reach the ranch tonight if I could. I told Mr. Garrett I would arrive by mid-May, and I am already a few days behind." Eliza nodded toward the darkness beyond her small circle of lantern light. "If you follow the road about another hour north, you will see the turnoff for the Garrett place. There is a large wooden sign at the entrance. You cannot miss it, even in the dark." "Thank you," Xavier said. He started to turn away, then paused and looked back at her. "Will you be out here all night by yourself?" "I will," Eliza said. "I do this most nights. Someone has to watch the flock." "That seems like a heavy burden for one person," Xavier said. "It is what needs to be done," Eliza replied simply. "My father's back is injured and we cannot afford to hire help, so I do it." Xavier was quiet for a moment, and Eliza could see something thoughtful in his expression. "Well, for what it is worth, you seem quite capable. Not many people could have gotten the drop on me like you did with that rifle." "You have good instincts." Despite herself, Eliza felt a small smile tug at her lips. "I have had practice. Good night, Mr. Ashford." "Good night, miss." He paused, realizing he did not know her name. "Ramsey," Eliza said. "Eliza Ramsey." "Good night, Miss Ramsey. I hope the rest of your watch is peaceful." Xavier tipped his hat to her, then disappeared back into the darkness. A moment later, she heard the sound of a horse being mounted and hoofbeats heading north along the road. Eliza sat very still for a long time after he left, her heart still beating faster than normal. It was not often that strangers appeared on their property, especially not in the middle of the night. But there had been something different about Xavier Ashford. He had seemed kind, respectful. And he had not looked at her like she was strange for counting stars. She shook her head, pushing the thoughts away. He was just a passing cowboy heading to a job at the Garrett Ranch. She would probably never see him again. There was no point in thinking about him further. But as she returned her gaze to the stars and resumed her counting, she found her concentration broken. Her mind kept drifting back to his face in the lantern light, the way his voice had sounded when he asked about the stars. Finally, she gave up on counting and simply sat watching the sky, letting her thoughts wander where they would. The night passed slowly. The coyotes howled a few more times but never came close enough to threaten the flock. As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern horizon, Eliza gathered her things and herded the sheep back toward the barn. Her father would be waking soon, and there were morning chores to be done before she could catch a few hours of sleep. Her mother was indeed waiting up, sitting in the kitchen with her mending basket. She looked up as Eliza entered, her tired eyes searching her daughter's face. "Any trouble?" Margaret Ramsey asked. "Nothing serious," Eliza said. "The coyotes were prowling, but they stayed away." And a cowboy passed by on the road, heading to the Garrett ranch. He introduced himself so I would not be alarmed. Her mother's expression tightened with concern. "A stranger, did he threaten you?" "No, Mama," Eliza said quickly. "He was very polite. He just wanted to make sure I knew he was passing through rather than sneaking around. His name was Xavier Ashford, and Mr. Garrett hired him." Margaret relaxed slightly. "Well, I suppose that was considerate of him. Still, I do not like you being out there alone at night. It is not safe for a young woman." "We have been through this, Mama," Eliza said gently. "Someone has to do it, and I am capable. We cannot lose any more sheep." I know," her mother said, waving her hand wearily. "Go get some rest. I will wake you at midday for the afternoon chores." Eliza climbed the narrow stairs to the small bedroom she had to herself since Thomas had died. She lay down on the thin mattress, still fully clothed except for her boots, and pulled the quilt up to her chin. Despite her exhaustion, sleep did not come easily. She kept seeing Xavier Ashford's face, kept hearing his voice asking about the stars. It was foolish, she told herself. She did not know anything about him except his name and where he was working. He was probably just being polite because she had a rifle. But there had been something in his eyes, a genuine curiosity and interest that she rarely saw directed at her. Most of the young men in Porterville either ignored her because she spent her nights with sheep instead of at social gatherings, or they looked at her with pity because everyone knew the Ramsey family was struggling. Xavier had looked at her like she was interesting. Eliza finally drifted off to sleep as the sun climbed higher in the sky, her dreams filled with stars and a cowboy's kind eyes. 3 days passed. Eliza continued her nightly watches, counting stars and keeping the coyotes at bay. During the days, she helped her mother with the endless tasks that kept the household running, washing clothes, preparing meals, tending the small vegetable garden, mending tears in fabric. Her father worked in the fields, moving slowly because of his injured back, planting what crops they could afford and hoping for a good growing season. On the 4th night after meeting Xavier, Eliza was once again settling in with her flock when she heard footsteps approaching. This time she recognized the measured pace and was not as startled when Xavier's voice called out from the darkness. "Miss Ramsey, it is Xavier Ashford. I am approaching from the south. I did not want to startle you again." Eliza felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. "You can come closer, Mr. Ashford." He emerged into the circle of lantern light, looking less dusty than before but just as tired. He carried a small bundle in his hands. "I hope I am not intruding," he said. "I have been working at the Garrett ranch these past few days, and I happened to be riding back from town when I saw your light again. I thought I might stop by and see how you were faring." "That is kind of you," Eliza said, and she meant it. "How is the work at the ranch?" "Hard but honest," Xavier said. "Mr. Garrett is a fair man and the other hands have been welcoming enough. I am still learning the lay of the land and getting to know the herd, but it is good work." He held out the bundle he was carrying. "I brought you something." I hope you do not think it too forward of me." Eliza took the bundle, her curiosity piqued. When she unwrapped the cloth, she found a thick book inside. Even in the dim lantern light, she could see the title embossed on the cover, An Atlas of the Heavens. Her breath caught. "I cannot accept this. It must have cost you dearly." "I have been saving my wages," Xavier said, "and I wanted to. You mentioned you liked studying the stars, and when I saw this in the general store in town, I thought of you. The shopkeeper said it has more detailed maps than most basic astronomy books." Eliza ran her fingers over the cover, overwhelmed by the gesture. No one outside her immediate family had ever given her such a thoughtful gift. "Why would you do this for me? You barely know me." Xavier was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was soft. "I have been thinking about you these past few days, about how you sit out here alone every night, watching over your family's livelihood, about how you count the stars like they are old friends. There is something remarkable about that, about you. I wanted to give you something that might make these long nights a little less lonely." Eliza looked up from the book to meet his eyes, and what she saw there made her heart race. There was genuine affection in his gaze, an openness that she had never experienced before. She realized that this cowboy, this near stranger, saw something in her that others had overlooked. "Thank you," she said quietly. "This is the kindest thing anyone has done for me in a very long time." "May I sit with you for a while?" Xavier asked, "if it would not be improper." "I promise to be respectful. I would just like to talk to you if you are willing." Eliza knew she should probably say no. She barely knew this man, and her reputation could suffer if anyone saw them together unchaperoned. But the hopeful look in his eyes and the way her heart was beating made her throw caution aside. "You can stay," she said, "but I do not have another stool. You will have to sit on the ground." "I have spent most of my life sitting on the ground," Xavier said with a smile. "I think I can manage." He settled down on the grass near her stool, close enough to talk comfortably, but far enough to maintain propriety. For a while they sat in companionable silence, both looking up at the stars. "Did you really mean what you said?" Eliza asked finally. "About thinking of me these past few days?" "I did," Xavier said. "I know it might seem strange, given that we only met briefly, but there was something about you, about that moment. The way you held that rifle, so capable and fearless. The way you talked about counting stars like it was the most natural thing in the world. I have met a lot of people in my travels, Miss Ramsey, but I have never met anyone quite like you." Eliza felt heat rise to her cheeks and was grateful for the darkness that hid her blush. "You do not know me well enough to say that." "Then let me get to know you better," Xavier said. "Tell me about yourself. How did you end up guarding sheep in the middle of the night?" So Eliza told him. She told him about Thomas dying 3 years ago, leaving her father without help on the farm. She told him about her father's back injury from a fall 2 winters past, and how the doctor said he would never fully recover. She told him about the endless struggle to keep the farm running, to make enough money to pay their debts and buy seed for the next season. She told him about how she had volunteered to take over the night watches because she was young and strong and someone had to do it. Xavier listened without interrupting, his attention focused entirely on her. When she finished, he shook his head slowly. "You are braver than most men I know," he said. "To take on that kind of responsibility at such a young age, to sacrifice your own comfort for your family, that takes real courage." "I do not feel brave," Eliza admitted. "Most of the time I just feel tired and lonely, if I am being honest. I do not get to see other people my age very often. By the time I wake up in the afternoons, everyone else is busy with their own work, and at night, well, I am out here with the sheep." "You must get lonely," Xavier said softly. "That is a hard way to live." "It is the way things are," Eliza said. I try not to complain about it. My parents did not choose this struggle and neither did I. We are just trying to survive. What about your dreams? Xavier asked. What would you do if you did not have to watch sheep every night? Eliza was quiet, considering the question. No one had ever asked her that before. I think I would want to learn more, to read books and study things. I only had basic schooling before we left Missouri, and I have always felt like there was so much more I wanted to know. I would want to understand the stars properly, not just count them, but really understand how they move and why. I would want to know about other places in the world, about science and literature and history. Those are good dreams, Xavier said. Important dreams. They are impossible dreams, Eliza said with a hint of bitterness. We can barely afford to keep the farm running. There is no money for more education, no time for studying. I will probably spend the rest of my life guarding sheep and helping with chores until I am too old to do it anymore. What about marriage? Xavier asked, then seemed to catch himself. I apologize, that was too personal a question. It is all right, Eliza said. The truth is, I do not think about it much. Most men in town are not interested in a woman who spends her nights with sheep and smells like wool most of the time. And the few who have expressed interest were only doing so because their families wanted our land. My father turned them down. Their loss, Xavier said firmly. Any man would be lucky to have someone like you. The way he said it with such conviction made Eliza's heart skip. She looked at him, really looked at him, seeing the sincerity in his expression. What about you? She asked, trying to shift the focus. What are your dreams? Xavier leaned back on his hands, gazing up at the stars. I want to have my own place someday. Not a big ranch, just a small spread where I can raise some cattle and horses. Somewhere I can build a home and put down roots. I have been drifting from job to job since I was 16 after my parents died from cholera. I am tired of moving around. I want something that is mine, something permanent. That is a good dream too, Eliza said. More achievable than mine, probably. I do not know about that, Xavier said. Land is expensive, and saving money when you are working for wages is difficult. But I keep trying. Every month I put aside as much as I can. Maybe in a few more years I will have enough for a down payment on something small. They continued talking as the night deepened around them. Xavier told her stories about his cattle drives, about the long days in the saddle and the camaraderie among the cowboys. He told her about seeing different parts of Texas, about the people he had met and the places he had been. In turn, Eliza shared her memories of Missouri, of what life had been like before they moved west. She told him about her brother Thomas, about how much she still missed him. The hours passed without either of them noticing. It was only when the first hints of dawn began to appear on the horizon that Xavier reluctantly got to his feet. I should go, he said. I have to be at the ranch for the morning work, but may I come visit you again? I would like that, Eliza said, surprised by how much she meant it. Tomorrow night then, Xavier said. If you are agreeable. I am agreeable, Eliza said, feeling a smile spread across her face. Xavier grinned back at her, and for a moment they just stood there, smiling at each other in the growing light. Then he tipped his hat to her and headed back toward where he had left his horse. Eliza watched him ride away, her heart feeling lighter than it had in years. She looked down at the astronomy atlas still clutched in her hands, running her fingers over the cover again. Xavier Ashford had given her more than just a book. He had given her something she had not realized she was missing: hope. True to his word, Xavier returned the following night, and the night after that, and the night after that. Soon it became their routine. After his work at the Garrett Ranch was done for the day, Xavier would ride over to the Ramsey farm and spend the evening hours sitting with Eliza while she watched the sheep. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing their thoughts and dreams, learning about each other in the way that people do when they are falling in love. Because that was what was happening, though neither of them said it out loud at first. Eliza found herself thinking about Xavier during the day, counting the hours until he would arrive. She started taking more care with her appearance, brushing her long brown hair until it shone and pinning it back neatly. She washed her dresses more frequently, wanting to look her best for him. Xavier, for his part, was equally smitten. He found himself rushing through his work at the ranch, eager to finish so he could ride over to see Eliza. The other cowboys teased him about where he disappeared to every evening, but he did not care. Being with Eliza made him happier than he had been in years. One night, about 3 weeks after their first real conversation, Xavier brought another gift. This time it was a warm woolen blanket. "The nights are still cold," he said as he presented it to her. "I thought this might help keep you comfortable during the watches." "You need to stop spending your wages on me," Eliza protested, even as she accepted the blanket gratefully. "You are supposed to be saving for your own place." "I can do both," Xavier said. "Besides, making you happy is more important to me than saving every penny." Eliza wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, touched by his thoughtfulness. "You know, people in town are starting to talk about us. Mr. Garrett mentioned to my father that you have been riding out this way every night." Xavier's expression grew serious. "Does that bother you, what people say?" "No," Eliza said honestly, "but I think you should probably meet my parents properly. It is only right." Xavier nodded. "I agree." "Would this Sunday be appropriate? I have the afternoon off." "Sunday would be perfect," Eliza said. That Sunday, Xavier arrived at the Ramsey farm in the early afternoon, freshly bathed and wearing his best clothes. Eliza had told her parents to expect him, though her father had been skeptical about the whole thing. "I have heard about this cowboy from Mr. Garrett," William Ramsey said as he sat in his chair by the fire, his back too painful to stand for long periods. "He says you are a good worker at least. But what are your intentions toward my daughter?" Xavier stood before him, hat in hand, his posture respectful but confident. "My intentions are entirely honorable, sir. I care for Eliza very much, and I would like your permission to court her properly." "You are a cowboy with no property and modest wages," William said bluntly. "How do you propose to support a wife, Papa?" Eliza said, embarrassment coloring her voice, but Xavier did not seem offended. "You are right to ask, sir. Right now, I cannot offer much except hard work and honest intentions, but I am saving every penny I can toward buying my own land. Mr. Garrett has indicated that if I continue to work well, he might be willing to sell me a small parcel at the edge of his property at a fair price. It would not be much at first, but it would be a start, and I would work every day to build something worthwhile, something I could share with Eliza if she will have me." Margaret Ramsey, who had been listening from her seat at the kitchen table, spoke up. "And what about now? What about the next few years while you are saving? Eliza cannot just wait indefinitely." "I would not ask her to," Xavier said. He turned to look at Eliza, his eyes full of emotion. "But I hope she might consider that some things are worth waiting for. I know I am not the best prospect. I know there are probably men with more to offer. But I can promise that no one will care for her more than I do. No one will work harder to build a good life for her." William and Margaret exchanged a long look, communicating in the silent way that couples do after years of marriage. Finally, William nodded. "You may court her," he said, "but I expect you to be respectful, and if your circumstances change, if you lose your job or cannot save the way you plan, we will revisit this conversation." "Thank you, sir," Xavier said, relief evident in his voice. "You will not regret this." After the formal meeting, Margaret insisted Xavier stay for Sunday dinner. It was a simple meal of stewed chicken and vegetables with fresh bread, but it was clear she had put effort into making it special. As they ate, the conversation became more relaxed, and Eliza could see her parents warming to Xavier. He was polite and respectful, but also genuine and warm. He complimented Margaret's cooking sincerely and asked William thoughtful questions about farming. After dinner, Xavier asked if he might walk with Eliza around the property. Her parents agreed, though Margaret insisted they stay within sight of the house. Eliza and Xavier walked slowly toward the sheep pen, savoring the rare opportunity to be together in daylight. "Your parents are good people," Xavier said. "I can see where you get your strength from." "They liked you," Eliza said. "I could tell. My father would not have given his permission otherwise." Xavier stopped walking and turned to face her. They were standing near the fence of the sheep pen, the animals grazing peacefully nearby. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow over everything. "Eliza," Xavier said, his voice suddenly serious, "I need to tell you something. These past few weeks, getting to know you, spending my evenings watching the stars with you, it has been the happiest time of my life. I know we have not known each other long, but I am certain of my feelings. I am falling in love with you. I think I have been since that first night when I saw you sitting there counting stars." Eliza's breath caught in her throat. She had known her own feelings were growing stronger every day, but hearing Xavier say the words out loud made her heart soar. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "I try to tell myself it is too soon, that I should be more cautious, but my heart does not care about caution. It wants what it wants, and it wants you." Xavier reached out and gently took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. It was the first time they had held hands, and the simple touch sent warmth flooding through her. "I promise you," he said softly, "I will work as hard as I can to make myself worthy of you. I will save every penny. I will build us a home. It might take a few years, but I will do it. If you are willing to wait for me, I will make you happy." "I will wait," Eliza said, "however long it takes." They stood there for a long moment, hands joined, looking into each other's eyes. Then, mindful of her parents watching from the house, they resumed their walk, fingers still intertwined. The courtship that followed was unlike anything Eliza had imagined. Because of her nightly duties with the sheep, traditional courtship activities were impossible. They could not attend town dances or socials. They could not go on picnics or buggy rides during the day when Xavier was working and Eliza was sleeping. Instead, their entire relationship unfolded under the stars during those long night watches. But far from being a limitation, it became something special. The darkness and quiet created an intimacy that might not have developed so quickly otherwise. Without the distractions of other people or daytime activities, they truly got to know each other on a deep level. They shared their fears and hopes, their past hurts and future dreams. They discussed books and ideas. They debated philosophy and religion. They learned each other's quirks and habits. Xavier taught Eliza about horses and cattle, about reading animal behavior and understanding the land. Eliza taught Xavier about the stars, using her new atlas to show him the constellations and tell him their mythological stories. They created their own private world there in the darkness, with only the sheep as witnesses to their growing love. As spring turned to summer in 1878, their relationship deepened. Xavier began talking more concretely about his plans for their future. He had approached Mr. Garrett about the possibility of purchasing a small parcel of land, and the older man had been receptive. They had worked out a plan where Xavier would make payments over several years, with the deed transferring once the full amount was paid. It was not a large piece of property, only about 20 acres, but it had good grazing land and access to water. If I can work some extra jobs and save aggressively, I might be able to make the full down payment by next spring, Xavier told Eliza one night in July. They were sitting side by side now, Eliza on her stool and Xavier on an old crate he had brought over. Then we could start building a house. Nothing fancy at first, just a simple cabin, but it would be ours. Next spring, Eliza repeated, her heart swelling with hope. That is less than a year away. Would you marry me then? Xavier asked suddenly. I know I should wait, should ask your father first formally. But I need to know how you feel. If I can make this happen, if I can have a piece of land and the start of a home by next spring, would you marry me? Yes, Eliza said without hesitation. Yes, I would marry you. Xavier's face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. He took both her hands in his, pulling her gently to her feet. They stood facing each other in the lantern light, the sheep scattered around them, the vast Colorado sky stretching above. I love you, Eliza Ramsey, Xavier said. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret saying yes. I love you too, Xavier Ashford, Eliza replied, and I already know I will never regret it. Xavier pulled her into his arms, holding her close. Eliza rested her head against his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart. For a long time they just stood there, wrapped in each other's arms under the stars, the future suddenly bright with possibility. But life, as it often does, had complications in store. In August, William Ramsey's back condition worsened significantly. The pain became so severe that he could barely leave his bed. The local doctor visited and gave them hard news. William needed surgery, an expensive procedure that would require traveling to Denver and staying there for several weeks of recovery. The cost would devastate the family's already precarious finances. Margaret and Eliza sat up late into the night, going over the numbers again and again, but there was no way around it. They would have to sell some of the sheep to pay for the surgery. And selling sheep meant less wool to sell next year, which meant less income. When Eliza told Xavier about the situation, she could see the worry in his eyes. They both knew what this meant. The family would need her help more than ever. There would be no question of her marrying and leaving them in the next year, possibly not for several years. We will figure it out, Xavier said, though his voice was strained. Your father's health is what matters most right now. I cannot leave them, Eliza said, tears streaming down her face. They need me, especially if my father cannot work after the surgery. I am so sorry, Xavier. I know we made plans. Do not apologize, Xavier said firmly, pulling her close. Family comes first, always. We will wait, however long it takes. But what about the land? Your agreement with Mr. Garrett? Xavier was quiet for a moment. I will have to tell him I cannot move forward with it right now. Maybe he will hold it for me, or maybe someone else will buy it. Either way, it does not matter. What matters is you and your family getting through this. You would give up your dream for me? Eliza asked, looking up at him. You are my dream, Xavier said simply. The land, the house, all of it only matters if I can share it with you, and if that means waiting a few more years, then we wait. The next few weeks were difficult. William had his surgery in Denver, with Margaret accompanying him and staying in a boarding house nearby during his recovery. Eliza remained at the farm with their neighbor, an older widow named Mrs. Chen, staying with her for propriety's sake while her parents were away. Eliza managed the farm as best she could, with Xavier helping whenever he had free time from his ranch work. During those weeks, Eliza saw a different side of Xavier. She saw his work ethic as he helped with tasks that were beyond her physical strength, never complaining about the extra labor. She saw his steadiness in crisis, his calm reassurance when she felt overwhelmed. She saw his integrity when he spoke with Mr. Garrett and explained why he had to postpone his land purchase, and how Garrett respected him for putting family first. "That boy is good people, Mrs. Chen told Eliza one evening. "You hold on to him. Men like that do not come along often." "I plan to," Eliza said. William returned from Denver in September, recovering but still weak. The surgery had been successful, but he would need months of rest before he could return to any kind of physical labor. The financial situation was dire. They had sold half the flock to pay for the surgery and associated costs, and they were behind on their loan payments to the bank. One evening in early October, as Eliza sat with the remaining sheep during her night watch, she felt despair creeping in. Xavier had not been able to visit for several days because of increased work at the Garrett Ranch preparing for winter. The stars that had once brought her comfort now seemed cold and distant. She was exhausted, worried, and lonely. Then she heard familiar hoofbeats, and her heart lifted as Xavier appeared in the lantern light. But something was different about him. There was an excitement in his expression that she had not seen in weeks. "I have news," he said, dismounting quickly and coming to her. "Important news." "What is it?" Eliza asked, standing up. "Mr. Garrett called me into his office today. His foreman is planning to retire at the end of the year and move back east to live with his daughter. Garrett offered me the position." Eliza gasped. "Xavier, that is wonderful, but what about Sam? He has been there longer than you." "Sam does not want the responsibility. He told Garrett as much." "The pay is almost double what I make now, Eliza, and it comes with a small house on the property. It is not much, just a 2-room cabin, but it is included as part of the compensation." Eliza felt her heart begin to race as she understood what he was saying. "You would have enough money. Enough to help your family and eventually buy land." "More than that," Xavier said, taking her hands. "I would have a home, a place to bring a wife. It is not the dream exactly as I imagined it, not my own land yet, but it is a start, a real start." He took a deep breath, then dropped to one knee right there in the grass, still holding her hands. "Eliza Ramsey, I know the timing is complicated. I know your family needs you, but I have a proposal. Marry me this spring as we originally planned. Move into the foreman's cabin with me. Your parents would not lose your help because we would be nearby. The cabin is only about 3 miles from here. You could come back during the day to help your mother, and in the evenings, I would come with you to help watch the flock until your father is fully recovered. Between my wages as foreman and both of us working together, we could help your family get back on their feet, and we would be together. We would not have to wait years. We could start our life now." Eliza stared at him, her mind racing. "But that would mean you would be working all day at the ranch, then coming here to help at night. You would never sleep." "I would manage," Xavier said. "We would figure it out together. Married couples do. The point is, we would not have to keep waiting for life to be perfect before we can be together. We would face the challenges as a team." "My parents," Eliza said. "They would not want me to leave them when things are so difficult." "Then let's ask them," Xavier said. "Let me present this plan to your father. If he says no, I will accept it. But let me try." The next Sunday, Xavier came to the Ramsey house again. This time his proposal was not just for Eliza but for the whole family. He laid out his plan in detail, how he would take the foreman position, how he and Eliza would marry and live in the cabin on the Garrett Ranch, how they would both continue to help the Ramsey family during this difficult time. William listened carefully, his expression thoughtful. When Xavier finished, the older man was quiet for a long time. "You would take on my daughter and my family's burdens all at once?" he finally asked. "Eliza is not a burden, sir," Xavier said firmly. "She is the woman I love, and helping her family is not a burden either, it is an honor." Family takes care of family. If Eliza and I marry, then you become my family too. We could pay you, Margaret offered, for the help with the flock. I would not accept it, Xavier said. But what I would like, if you are agreeable, is to occasionally borrow a sheep or two for our own table. Fresh meat would help stretch my wages. William smiled for the first time. That seems fair. Then his expression grew serious again. Eliza, what do you want? This is your life we are discussing. Eliza looked at Xavier, then at her parents. I want to marry Xavier. I want to start our life together, and I want to still be able to help you. Xavier's plan lets me do both. So yes, this is what I want. Then you have my blessing, William said. Both of you. Margaret nodded her agreement, tears in her eyes. I always hoped my daughter would find a good man. I am glad she found you, Xavier. The wedding was planned for the following April, giving Xavier time to settle into his new role as foreman and prepare the cabin for Eliza's arrival. Through the fall and winter, Xavier threw himself into his work with renewed energy. He repaired the cabin, fixing the roof and replacing worn floorboards. He built new furniture, a proper bed frame, a sturdy table, chairs. He repainted the walls and installed new windows. By the time spring arrived, the little two-room cabin had been transformed into a cozy home. Eliza spent those months preparing as well, sewing new dresses and linens, learning new recipes from her mother, absorbing all the practical knowledge she would need as a wife running her own household. But still, every night she was out with the sheep, and almost every night Xavier joined her. Their time together under the stars took on a new quality now that their wedding was approaching. There was an anticipation, an excitement about finally beginning their life together. But there was also a bittersweetness to these last nights of courtship, knowing that this phase of their relationship was coming to an end. I will miss this, Eliza said one night in March. These quiet hours with just us and the stars. We will still have them, Xavier said. Maybe not every night, but I promise you, we will make time to sit under the stars together. I will never forget that this is where we fell in love. The wedding took place on a beautiful April morning in 1879 at the small church in Porterville. It was a simple ceremony, attended by family and a few close friends. Eliza wore a dress of pale blue cotton that she and her mother had sewn together, with wildflowers in her hair. Xavier wore his best suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his eyes shining with love as he watched his bride walk down the aisle. The vows were traditional, but when Xavier said, "I do," his voice rang out clear and strong, leaving no doubt about his commitment. When it was Eliza's turn, she looked into his eyes and felt such overwhelming love that she could barely speak. But she managed to say the words, "I do," and they were sealed with truth and promise. At the simple reception held at the Ramsey farm afterward, friends and neighbors offered their congratulations and best wishes. Mr. Garrett attended and made a short speech about what a fine foreman Xavier had already proven to be, and how lucky he was to have found such a capable young woman for a wife. As the afternoon wore on, Eliza found a quiet moment with her parents. Her mother hugged her tightly, whispering blessings and advice. Her father, still moving carefully because of his back, embraced her gently. "You have chosen well," he told her. "That young man will take good care of you." "I know, Papa," Eliza said, tears in her eyes, "and I will still be nearby. I will come help as often as I can." "You worry about your own household now," William said. "Your mother and I will manage. We have already hired a local boy to help with the night watches. You have done enough, Eliza. It is time for you to live your own life." Those words, releasing her from the responsibility she had carried for so long, were the greatest wedding gift her father could have given her. As the sun began to set, Xavier and Eliza said their goodbyes and rode together toward the Garrett Ranch and their new home. They traveled slowly, neither in a rush, savoring the journey. The spring evening was mild, with the scent of new grass and wildflowers carried on the breeze. When they arrived at the cabin, Xavier dismounted and then lifted Eliza down from her horse, holding her for a moment before setting her feet on the ground. Then, in a gesture that made her laugh with delight, he picked her up again and carried her over the threshold. The interior of the cabin glowed with lamplight. Xavier had prepared everything earlier in the day. There were fresh flowers in a jar on the table, a fire crackling in the small hearth, and the bed was made up with the new quilts Eliza had sewn. "Welcome home, Mrs. Ashford," Xavier said softly, setting her down gently. "Home," Eliza repeated, looking around at the modest cabin that would be theirs. "It is perfect." That night they lay together in their new bed, Xavier's arms around Eliza, her head resting on his chest. Through the window they could see the stars shining in the dark sky. "Look," Xavier said, pointing. "There is Orion and the Big Dipper. Remember when you were counting stars that first night we met?" "I remember," Eliza said. "You startled me half to death." "Best mistake I ever made," Xavier said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Walking past your farm that night changed my whole life." "Mine too," Eliza said. "I was so lonely before I met you. I thought I would spend my whole life just working and surviving, never really living. You showed me that life could be more." "We are just beginning," Xavier said. "This is only the start of our story." The first months of marriage were an adjustment as they learned to navigate life together. Xavier's work as foreman was demanding, requiring him to be up before dawn and often working until after dark. But true to his word, he made time to help at the Ramsey farm several times a week, and he always made sure to spend his evenings with Eliza. Eliza took to managing their household with the same competence she had shown in everything else. She kept the cabin clean and organized, cooked hearty meals for Xavier, and maintained a small vegetable garden outside. Several days a week, she would ride over to her parents' farm to help her mother with chores and check on her father's continued recovery. But her favorite times were the evenings when Xavier would finish work early enough that they could sit outside together and watch the sunset fade into starlight. They would talk about their day, make plans for the future, and simply enjoy being together. Xavier had kept his promise. They still made time for the stars. In the summer of 1879, Eliza discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and a touch of nervous excitement. They would be parents by the following spring, responsible for a new life. Xavier became even more protective and attentive, insisting that Eliza not overwork herself and that she cut back on her trips to her parents' farm. "The baby and you are my priority," he said firmly when she protested. "Your parents have hired help now. They do not need you to exhaust yourself on their behalf." Eliza's pregnancy progressed smoothly through the fall and winter. Her mother visited often, bringing advice and reassurance. Margaret was delighted at the prospect of becoming a grandmother and spent hours sewing tiny clothes and blankets for the baby. On a cold morning in March of 1880, Eliza went into labor. Xavier rode frantically to fetch the midwife and Eliza's mother, then spent the next several hours pacing anxiously outside the cabin while the women attended to his wife. The sound of Eliza's pain frightened him, but he trusted in the midwife's experience and his mother-in-law's steady presence. Finally, just as the sun was setting, he heard a new sound, the sharp, indignant cry of a newborn baby. Moments later, Margaret appeared at the door, her face glowing. "You have a son," she said. "A healthy baby boy, and Eliza is doing well." Xavier rushed inside to find Eliza propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up at him with such love in her eyes that Xavier felt his own eyes fill with tears. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Xavier approached carefully, almost afraid to disturb the peaceful scene. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at the small face barely visible within the blankets. The baby had stopped crying and was making small, snuffling sounds, his tiny fists waving. "He is perfect," Xavier whispered. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking at their son, Eliza knew. "Thomas," she said, "after my brother, if that is all right with you." "Thomas is a good name," Xavier said. "Thomas Ashford." He carefully took the baby from Eliza, cradling him with the gentle confidence of a man who had handled many newborn animals in his work with cattle. Baby Thomas opened his eyes, dark and unfocused, seeming to study his father's face. "Hello, son," Xavier said softly. "I am your papa. And I promise you, I am going to work hard to give you a good life. You and your mama, you are everything to me." The early months of parenthood were exhausting but filled with joy. Xavier discovered that he loved being a father, delighting in every small milestone: Thomas's first smile, his first attempts to roll over, his growing awareness of the world around him. Eliza proved to be a natural mother, patient and loving despite her own exhaustion from the constant demands of caring for an infant. They settled into a new rhythm as a family of 3. Xavier would rise early for his work, spend his days managing the ranch hands and overseeing the cattle operations, then rush home in the evenings to spend time with his wife and son before darkness fell. On his days off, he would take on the household tasks that Eliza could not manage while caring for Thomas, chopping wood and making repairs and tending to their horses. Money was tight, as it was for most young families, but they managed. Xavier's wages as foreman were steady, and they were careful with their spending. They began to save again, slowly rebuilding toward Xavier's dream of having their own land. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, the Ashford family's life continued to settle into happy patterns. Xavier excelled in his role as foreman, and Mr. Garrett increasingly relied on his judgment and skills. The older man had no children of his own, and he had become fond of Xavier and his young family. One evening in the fall of 1881, Garrett invited Xavier and Eliza to dinner at his main house. It was a rare honor, as the rancher was known to be somewhat reclusive. Over a meal prepared by his housekeeper, Garrett made an unexpected announcement. "I am getting old," he said bluntly, "and I have been thinking about the future of this ranch. I have no heirs, no one to leave it to when I pass. I have decided to make you an offer, Xavier. I would like to sell you a significant portion of the ranch at a very fair price. You would take over operations of that section immediately, with payments made over time. When I die, you would have the option to purchase the remainder at the same favorable terms." Xavier and Eliza stared at him in shock. "Sir, I do not know what to say," Xavier managed. "That is incredibly generous." "It is practical," Garrett said. "You are the best foreman I have ever had. You understand this land, you understand cattle, and you treat the men who work for you with respect. I would rather see this ranch continue under your management than be sold off to strangers when I am gone." "We would need time to consider the offer," Eliza said, finding her voice, "to understand the full scope and what it would mean financially." "Of course," Garrett said. "Take all the time you need, but know that the offer is genuine and comes with my full confidence in your abilities." Over the next several weeks, Xavier and Eliza discussed the opportunity from every angle. They consulted with the bank, worked through the numbers, and sought advice from William, whose business sense was sharp despite his physical limitations. The conclusion was clear: this was an extraordinary opportunity, one that would secure their family's future for generations. In December of 1881, Xavier and Eliza signed the papers to purchase 200 acres of the Garrett Ranch, including grazing land, water rights, and several outbuildings. The payments would stretch over 15 years, but they were manageable with Xavier's wages and the income from the cattle. They would continue to live in the foreman's cabin for now, but the land was theirs. "We did it," Xavier said that night, holding Eliza close as they stood outside the cabin looking up at the stars. Thomas was asleep inside, watched over by Margaret, who had come to stay with them for the evening. "We actually did it. We have land. A future." "Our dream," Eliza said, leaning against him. "Remember when you told me about wanting a small place to raise cattle and horses, where you could build a home and put down roots? And you said it was more achievable than your dream of learning and studying," Xavier recalled. "But look at you now. You have been teaching yourself from every book you can borrow. You have been teaching Thomas his letters already, even though he is barely 2 years old." "We are both living our dreams," Eliza said. "Together." The years that followed were full and rich. Xavier and Eliza worked hard to build their cattle operation, slowly expanding their herd and improving their land. Thomas grew into a bright, curious boy who loved following his father around the ranch and learning about the cattle. In 1883, Eliza gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Margaret after Eliza's mother. 2 years later, another son arrived, whom they called William after Eliza's father. The little cabin that had seemed perfectly adequate for a young married couple became cramped with 3 children. In 1886, using money they had carefully saved, Xavier began building a proper house on their land. It was not grand, but it had 4 bedrooms, a large kitchen, and a sitting room with big windows that looked out toward the mountains. Eliza helped plan every detail, ensuring the house would meet their family's needs. The day they moved into the new house was bittersweet. They had been happy in the little cabin, had started their married life there, had welcomed their first child there. But the new house represented progress, the fruit of their hard work and sacrifice. "Look," Xavier said to Eliza on their first night in the new house. They stood together in the master bedroom, which had windows on 2 walls. "You can see the stars from bed. I made sure of that when I planned the window placement." Eliza felt tears prick her eyes at the thoughtfulness of the gesture. Even after years of marriage, Xavier still remembered what mattered to her. "It is perfect," she said. Life was not without its challenges. There were hard winters when they lost cattle to cold and disease. There were dry summers when the grass grew thin and water was scarce. There were years when prices for beef dropped and money was desperately tight. But Xavier and Eliza faced each challenge together, their partnership strengthened by shared struggle and mutual support. William Ramsey died in the winter of 1889, his back finally giving out completely. Though his death was not unexpected, it hit the family hard. Eliza mourned the loss of the father who had always supported her unconventional life, as a young woman guarding sheep, who had welcomed Xavier with open arms despite his lack of wealth, who had blessed their marriage and delighted in his grandchildren. After William's death, Margaret came to live with Xavier and Eliza and their children. The house that had seemed spacious with just the 5 of them became cozy with 6, but no one minded. Margaret was a wonderful grandmother, telling the children stories and teaching them skills. She helped Eliza with the endless household tasks, and her presence brought comfort to everyone. In 1892, Mr. Garrett died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78. As promised in his agreement with Xavier, he had left the remainder of the ranch to be purchased by the Ashford family at the previously agreed terms. By this point, Xavier and Eliza had nearly paid off their original purchase and had good credit with the bank. They were able to secure the additional land, making them the owners of a substantial ranch. Thomas, now 12 years old, was already proving himself to be a capable cattleman. Margaret, at 9, was bright and independent like her mother. William, at 7, was more quiet and thoughtful but showed promise with horses. The children understood that the ranch would one day be theirs, and they took pride in helping their parents build something lasting. One evening in the summer of 1893, after a long day of work, Xavier and Eliza took a rare moment to themselves. They climbed to the top of a small hill on their property, bringing a blanket to sit on. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Their children were safely at home under their grandmother's supervision. "You remember," Eliza said, leaning against Xavier's shoulder, "that first night when you found me counting stars?" "How could I forget?" Xavier said, wrapping his arm around her. "I was just a drifting cowboy trying to get to a new job, and I stopped to be polite to a girl with a rifle. And I thought you were going to rob us or worse," Eliza said with a laugh. "Instead, I fell in love," Xavier said. "Right there, that very first night. I looked at you sitting there in the darkness, counting stars like they were old friends, so brave and alone. I knew then that you were someone special." "I did not fall in love quite that fast," Eliza admitted. "But by the second night, when you brought me the astronomy book, I knew you were different from anyone I had ever met." 15 years, Xavier marveled. "We have been married for 15 years. Sometimes it feels like it was just yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we have always been together." "Both are true somehow," Eliza said. She tilted her head back to look up at the sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear. "I used to count stars because I was lonely, and it gave me something to do during those long watches. Now I look at the stars and I think about how far we have come. How many dreams we have made real." "Not just my dreams," Xavier said. "Yours too. You have taught yourself so much over the years. You have taught our children. You have built a library in our home that would be the envy of many town folk." It was true. Over the years, Eliza had slowly accumulated books whenever they could afford them. She had taught herself advanced mathematics, science, literature, history. She had ensured that all 3 of their children received educations far beyond what was common for ranch children. She had created a life of the mind alongside her life of physical labor. "We gave each other our dreams," Eliza said. "That is what marriage should be." As the stars emerged fully in the darkening sky, Xavier and Eliza sat together in comfortable silence. Below them, they could see their house with lamplight glowing in the windows. They could see their barn and outbuildings, their cattle grazing in the distance, the land that they had worked so hard to make their own. "Count them with me," Xavier said suddenly. "Like you used to do." So they counted stars together, just as they had in the early days of their courtship. Their voices mingled in the quiet evening air, marking constellations and creating patterns. It was a return to where they began, a reminder of the foundation their love was built upon. 147, Eliza said, completing a section of sky. 148, Xavier continued. 149, they said together, then dissolved into laughter. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow as years do. Margaret Ramsey passed away peacefully in 1895, surrounded by her family. The children grew into young adults. Thomas married a kind young woman from town and built a house on the northern section of the ranch property. He and his wife gave Xavier and Eliza their first grandchild, a boy, in 1897. Margaret, the daughter, surprised everyone by declaring her intention to attend the Colorado Agricultural College, becoming one of the few women in her class. William proved to have a natural gift with horses and began breeding and training them alongside the cattle operation. Through it all, Xavier and Eliza remained the heart of the family and the ranch. They worked together, planned together, faced challenges together. Their love, which had begun under the stars on night watches, had matured into something deep and abiding. They knew each other's thoughts without speaking. They moved through life as a team, perfectly synchronized after decades of partnership. In the early summer of 1899, as they approached their 20th wedding anniversary, Xavier planned a surprise for Eliza. He had been secretly working on a project for months, building something with his own hands in whatever spare moments he could find. On the evening of their anniversary, he led Eliza away from the house, asking her to trust him and close her eyes. She did, letting him guide her carefully across the property. Finally, he told her to open her eyes. They were standing on the same hill where they often came to watch the stars. But now, there was a small structure there, a gazebo, carefully built with a roof but open sides, with a bench inside perfectly positioned to view the sky. "I thought we needed a proper place to count stars," Xavier said, suddenly nervous about whether she would like it. "Somewhere comfortable where we can sit together. I know we do not get as much time anymore with the ranch and the grandchildren, but I wanted to make sure we always had a special place just for us." Eliza walked slowly around the gazebo, running her hands over the smooth wood, taking in every detail. Then she turned to Xavier with tears streaming down her face. "It is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever made for me," she said. "Xavier Ashford, after 20 years you still find ways to show me how much you love me." "That is easy," Xavier said, pulling her into his arms. "You are the easiest person in the world to love." They sat together in the gazebo as the sun set and the stars emerged. They did not count this time, just held hands and watched the sky in the comfortable silence of people who have shared a lifetime together. "You ever think about that girl you were?" Xavier asked. 19 years old, sitting with the sheep, feeling like life was passing you by. "Sometimes," Eliza admitted. "She seems like a different person now, so young, so unsure of what her future held." "I think she would be proud of who you became," Xavier said, "of all you accomplished, all we built together." "I think she would be surprised," Eliza said with a smile. She never imagined a love like this was possible. She was counting stars and dreaming small dreams, not knowing that the best dream of all was about to walk into her life. "The cowboy who could not resist joining her watch," Xavier said, squeezing her hand. "And never stopped watching over me," Eliza finished. They sat until late into the night, watching the stars wheel overhead, occasionally pointing out constellations to each other or sharing memories. It was a perfect anniversary, simple and profound in the way that things between them always were. The first decade of the new century brought continued prosperity to the Ashford Ranch. Thomas proved to be an excellent cattleman, running much of the day-to-day operations as Xavier moved into a more advisory role. Margaret returned from college with a degree in agricultural science and began implementing new techniques on the ranch that increased their productivity. William's horse breeding program became renowned throughout Colorado, with buyers coming from across the state to purchase his animals. Xavier and Eliza, now in their 40s, found themselves with more time to enjoy the fruits of their labor. They traveled to Denver several times, experiencing the growing city and attending the theater, something Eliza had always wanted to do. They visited old friends and made new memories. But always they returned to their ranch, to the land they had built their life upon. In 1905, as they sat in their gazebo on a warm summer evening, Eliza rested her head on Xavier's shoulder and said, "We have had a good life, haven't we?" "The best life," Xavier agreed. "Sometimes I think about that cowboy I was, drifting from job to job with no real home. I could have ridden right past your farm that night. I almost did. But something made me stop, made me want to meet the person sitting out there with the sheep in the darkness." "Fate," Eliza said. "Or destiny. Or maybe just dumb luck." "Whatever it was, I am grateful for it every day," Xavier said. "You gave me everything I did not even know I was looking for: a home, a family, a purpose, love that I never imagined was possible." "We gave that to each other," Eliza corrected gently. "I was so lonely before I met you, Xavier. I thought my life would be nothing but work and duty. You showed me that life could be joyful, that love was real." More grandchildren arrived over the years. Thomas and his wife had 3 more children. Margaret, who had shocked some by marrying a fellow agricultural scientist she met at college, had 2 sons. William and his wife, the daughter of a neighboring rancher, had a daughter and twin boys. The ranch house was constantly filled with the sound of children's laughter during family gatherings. Xavier proved to be a wonderful grandfather, patient and playful in ways he had not always had time to be when his own children were young. Eliza loved teaching her grandchildren, just as she had taught their parents. She read to them, showed them the stars, encouraged their curiosity about the world. In 1910, the Ashford family celebrated Xavier and Eliza's 31st wedding anniversary with a large gathering at the ranch. Nearly 50 people attended: children, grandchildren, extended family, ranch hands past and present, friends from town and neighboring ranches. It was a joyful celebration of a marriage that had blessed so many lives beyond just the 2 people at its center. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Xavier found Eliza standing apart from the crowd, looking up at the darkening sky. He came to stand beside her, taking her hand. "Tired?" he asked. "A little," she admitted. "But it was a beautiful day. I am so grateful for all of it. Our family, our friends, this life we built." "Come with me," Xavier said. "I have one more gift for you." He led her to the gazebo on the hill. As they climbed the slope, Eliza saw that it was glowing with soft light. Xavier had hung lanterns all around it, creating a warm, inviting space. Inside, he had prepared a simple picnic with their favorite foods and a bottle of wine. "I wanted us to have this," he said. "Just us, like it was in the beginning. I know we were surrounded by love today, and that is wonderful. But I wanted to end this day the way we have ended so many others together, watching the stars." They sat in the gazebo, eating and talking and laughing. As the night deepened and the stars grew brighter, Eliza looked at her husband, his hair now more gray than dark, his face lined from years of working in the sun, his hands roughened by decades of labor. He was still the most handsome man she had ever seen. "I would do it all again," she said suddenly. "If I could go back to that night when you first appeared, I would make all the same choices, every single one." "So would I," Xavier said, "though I might bring you that astronomy book on the first night instead of the second. Why wait?" Eliza laughed. "Always so impatient." "Only when it comes to you," Xavier said, his voice turning serious. "I have loved you for more than 30 years, Eliza. I loved you from that first night, and I will love you until my last breath. Being your husband has been the greatest honor of my life." "And being your wife has been mine," Eliza said, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for stopping that night. Thank you for joining my watch. Thank you for loving me." "I never stopped watching over you," Xavier said, pulling her close. "From that first night until now and forever. You are my heart, Eliza." They held each other as the stars wheeled overhead, the same stars they had watched together for more than 3 decades. The lanterns flickered gently in the breeze. Below them, their ranch stretched out in the darkness, a testament to their hard work and shared dreams. The years continued their steady march. The second decade of the century brought automobiles to Porterville and even to the Ashford Ranch. Thomas purchased a truck for ranch work in 1915, though Xavier remained stubbornly attached to horses for as long as he could. The Great War came and went, touching their lives only peripherally as Colorado was far from the fighting. The ranch continued to prosper, now being managed primarily by the second generation while Xavier and Eliza enjoyed a well-earned semi-retirement. In 1920, they celebrated their 41st anniversary. Xavier was 63 years old, Eliza was 61. They were both still healthy and active, though they moved a bit more slowly than they once had. They spent their days doing light work around their own house, visiting with their numerous grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and still, whenever the weather permitted, they would climb to their gazebo to watch the stars. "You think they will keep it?" Eliza asked one evening, referring to the gazebo. "After we are gone, will the children maintain it?" "Thomas has already promised me he will," Xavier said. "He understands what it means to us, what it represents." "Good," Eliza said with satisfaction. "I like to think of our descendants coming here in the years to come, sitting where we have sat, watching the stars like we have. Telling their children about the farm girl who guarded sheep and counted stars," Xavier added. "And the cowboy who joined her watch," Eliza continued. "And never stopped watching," they finished together, smiling at the familiar refrain. As the 1920s progressed, Xavier's health began to decline. It was nothing dramatic, just the gradual wearing down that comes with age. His joints ached more, his energy flagged. In 1924, he had a mild heart episode that frightened everyone, though he recovered well with rest. After that, Eliza became even more protective of him, insisting he take things easy and let others handle the physical labor. Xavier grumbled about being coddled, but he secretly appreciated her fierce care. After all these years, she still loved him with the same intensity as when they were young. On a spring evening in 1926, Xavier and Eliza made their way slowly to the gazebo. It was harder for Xavier to climb the hill now, and they had to stop several times to rest. But he insisted on going. It had been a beautiful day, warm and clear, and he wanted to watch the sunset with his wife. They settled on the bench, Xavier's arm around Eliza's shoulders, her head resting on his chest. They did not talk much, just enjoyed being together in their special place. The sun set in a blaze of color and the stars began to appear. "There is Orion," Xavier said softly, pointing. "And the Big Dipper, just like always." "Just like always," Eliza agreed. They sat in comfortable silence as more stars emerged. Xavier felt a deep peace settle over him. This was everything he had ever wanted: this woman beside him, this land around them, this family they had built together. He had lived a good life, a full life. "Eliza," he said quietly, "I need you to promise me something." She lifted her head to look at him, concerned by his serious tone. "What is it?" "When I am gone, I need you to keep coming here, keep watching the stars. Promise me you will not just stop living. You will still have years ahead of you, and I want you to fill them with joy." "Xavier, do not talk like that," Eliza said, fear clutching her heart. "We have to talk about it eventually," Xavier said gently. "We have had 47 beautiful years together, more than most people get, but I am getting older and my heart is not as strong as it was. I need to know that you will be all right." "I will never be all right without you," Eliza said, tears streaming down her face. "You are my heart." "How can I go on if my heart stops beating?" Because our children and grandchildren need you, Xavier said. Because you are strong, stronger than you think. Because we have built something bigger than just the two of us, and it needs you to continue. I do not want to talk about this, Eliza said stubbornly. You are going to be fine. We are going to watch stars together for many more years. Xavier pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. I hope so, he said. God, I hope so. But Xavier's heart condition gradually worsened over the following months. By autumn, he was largely confined to the house, though he still insisted on sitting outside whenever the weather was good. The family rallied around them, with children and grandchildren visiting constantly, keeping Xavier's spirits up with stories and laughter. On a clear night in November 1926, Xavier asked Thomas to help him to the gazebo. Eliza protested that it was too cold, that he was too weak, but Xavier insisted. One more time, he said. I need to watch the stars with my wife one more time. So Thomas and William helped their father to the gazebo, wrapping him in warm blankets. Eliza sat beside him, holding his hand, fighting back tears. Their children and grandchildren gathered nearby, giving them privacy but staying close. Look at all those stars, Xavier said, his voice weak but full of wonder. Still so beautiful, still so mysterious, still infinite, Eliza added. Like my love for you. I am so glad I stopped that night, Xavier said. So glad I joined your watch. So am I, Eliza said, her voice breaking. You gave me everything, Xavier. Everything good in my life came from loving you. No, Xavier said, squeezing her hand gently. We gave each other everything. That is what love is. Not one person giving and the other receiving. Both giving, both receiving, until you cannot tell where one ends and the other begins. They sat together as the stars wheeled overhead, Xavier's breathing becoming more labored. Eliza held him close, memorizing every detail of this moment, the feel of his hand in hers, the sound of his voice, the way the starlight reflected in his eyes. Do not leave me, she whispered. Please do not leave me. Never, Xavier said with difficulty. Even when I am gone, I will still be watching over you. Look to the stars, and you will find me there. His eyes closed, and his breathing became even more shallow. Eliza felt panic rising in her chest and called for Thomas. The family gathered close as a doctor who had been waiting at the house was summoned. But before the doctor arrived, Xavier's eyes opened one last time. He looked at Eliza with such love that it took her breath away. My beautiful star counter, he whispered. I love you, always. Always, Eliza managed to say through her tears. Xavier's eyes closed again and his breathing stopped. Just like that, after 47 years of marriage, he was gone. Eliza held him, unwilling to let go, sobbing against his chest as their family surrounded them with love and support. The stars continued their ancient dance above, indifferent to human sorrow, eternal and unchanging. The weeks and months after Xavier's death were the hardest of Eliza's life. She moved through each day mechanically, doing what needed to be done but feeling only half alive. The house felt empty without Xavier's presence. The ranch felt less vibrant. Even the stars seemed dimmer somehow. Her children worried about her, but they understood that grief could not be rushed. They made sure she was never alone for long, that she had reasons to get up each day. The grandchildren and great-grandchildren visited constantly, filling the house with noise and life. Slowly, very slowly, Eliza began to heal. She would never stop missing Xavier. That hole in her heart would remain until her own death. But she learned to live with the grief, to carry it alongside her memories of joy. True to her promise to Xavier, she returned to the gazebo. At first, she could only sit there for a few minutes before the memories overwhelmed her. But gradually, she could stay longer. She began to find comfort in the familiar ritual of watching the stars. of remembering the countless nights she and Xavier had spent doing exactly this. She lived for 12 more years, passing away peacefully in her sleep in 1938 at the age of 79. In those 12 years, she had seen her family continue to grow and thrive. She had held great-great-grandchildren in her arms. She had watched the ranch prosper under Thomas's leadership and then begin to transition to the third generation. She had lived to see automobiles become commonplace, to hear radio broadcasts, to witness the world changing in ways she never could have imagined as a young woman guarding sheep. But through it all, she remained true to who she had always been, a woman who counted stars, who valued knowledge and learning, who loved deeply and completely. She taught countless grandchildren and great-grandchildren to appreciate the night sky. She passed down the story of how she and Xavier met, ensuring that their love story became part of the family legend. The night before she died, she asked Thomas to help her to the gazebo one last time. It was a warm summer evening, perfect for stargazing. She sat in the same spot where she had sat with Xavier so many times, and she looked up at the familiar constellations. "I am coming home," she whispered to the stars, to Xavier. "I have kept my promise. I lived. I stayed strong, but I am ready now. I am ready to be with you again." That night, she passed quietly in her sleep, a peaceful smile on her face. Her family mourned deeply, but took comfort in knowing she had lived a long, full life and was now reunited with the man she loved. Eliza was buried next to Xavier on a hill overlooking their ranch, near where the gazebo stood. Their graves were simple but well tended, always covered with fresh flowers placed by grateful descendants. The gazebo remained, carefully maintained by generation after generation of Ashfords. It became a tradition for couples in the family to go there on important occasions, anniversaries, engagements, quiet moments when they needed to reconnect. The gazebo was a reminder of Xavier and Eliza, of the love that had founded their family and built their ranch. On clear nights, if you climbed to that hill, you could still see the stars stretching endlessly overhead, the same stars that a farm girl once counted while guarding sheep, the same stars that a cowboy joined her in watching, the same stars that witnessed a love story for the ages. The ranch itself continued for many generations, eventually becoming one of the most respected cattle operations in Colorado. But it was always known as much for the love story of its founders as for its economic success. The tale of Eliza and Xavier was told and retold, embellished and honored, becoming a family treasure as valuable as the land itself. And sometimes, on those clear nights when the stars were brightest, family members would swear they could feel a presence in the gazebo, a sense of enduring love, of promises kept, of a cowboy who never stopped watching over the woman who counted stars. The farm girl had counted stars while guarding sheep. The cowboy had joined her watch, and he had watched her, loved her, cherished her forever in life and beyond it, their love as eternal and constant as the stars themselves.